Hi friends, continuing to the chapter Wings of Fire, an autobiography of APJ Abdul Kalam. I took up the executive responsibility of implementing the project within the framework of policy decision taken, the approved management plan and the project report, and also within the budget and through the powers of delegated to by the director. Dr. Braham Prasad formed from 4 project advisory committee to advise him on specialized areas like rocket motors, materials and fabrications, control and guidance, electronics and missions and launchings. He assured of guiding of outstanding scientists like D.S. Rana, Muttunayagam, T.S. Pradap, A.R. Archana, S.C. Gupta and C.L. Ambarao, to name a few. The Holy Quran says that we have sent down your revolution, showing you an account of those who have gone before you and an admonishments to righteous men. I sought to share the wisdoms of these extremely brilliant people. Lights upon the light, Allah guides to His light whom He will. He was knowledge of all things. We made 3 groups to carry out the project activities: a program management group, a integration and a flight testing group, and a substational development group. The first group was made responsible for looking after the overall executives aspects of SLV3 project managements, including administration, planning and evaluation, subsystem specializations, material fabrications, quality assurance and control. The integration and the flight testing groups was assigned the task of generating the facilities required for integration and flight testings of SLV3. They were also asked to carry out the analysis of the vehicle, including the mechanical and aerodynamic interfaces problem. The subsystems developed group was given the job of interacting with various divisions of VSSC and was made responsible for ensuring that all technical problems in developments of various subsystems were overcome by creating a synergy among the available talents in these divisions. The first project, a recruitment of 275 engineers and the scientists of SLV3, but could get only about 50. If it has not been a systematic effort, the whole project would have remained non-starter. Some young engineers like M.S.R. Dev, G. Madhavan Nair, S. Srinivasan, U.S. Singh, Surendra Rajan, Abdul Masij, Ved Prakash, Nambodari, Sashi Kumar and Shivasantu Pillai developed their own ground rules designed to help them work efficiently as a project team, and produced outstanding individuals and team results. These men were in the habit of celebrating their success together in a sort of a mutual appreciation club. This boosted morale and helped them a great deal to accept the setbacks and to revitalize themselves after periods of intensive work. Each members of SLV3 projects team was specialist in their own field. It was natural, therefore, that each one of them valued his independence. To manage the performances of such specialists, the team leader has to adopt a delicate balance between the hands-on and the hands-off approach. The hands-on approach take an active interest on a very regular basis in the members' work. The hands-off approach trusts team members and recognize their needs for autonomy to carry out their roles as they see fits. It hangs on their self motivation. When the leader goes too far with the hands on approach, he is seen as an anxious and interfacing type. If he goes too far hands off, he is seen as an abandoning his responsibility or not being interested. Today, the member of SLV3 team has grown to lead some of the country's most prestigious programs. MSR Dev heads the Argument Satellite Launch Vehicle, that is ASLV project. Mahadevan Nair is the chief of the Polar Satellite Launch Vehicle, that is PSLV project. And Sandalas and Shivashantu Pillai are chief collaterals in DRDO headquarters. Each of these men rose to his present positions through constitute hard work and rock-like willpower. It was indeed an experimentally talented team. Having taken up the leadership of executing the SLV3 project, we have faced a urgent and a conflict demands on the time for committee works, materials procurement and correspondent reviews, briefing, and for the needs to be informed on a wide range of subjects. His day would start with a stroll of about 2 kilometers around the lodge he was living in. He used to prepare a general schedule during his morning walks and empathize 2 or 3 things which would definitely like to accomplish during the day, including at least one thing that would help achieve long-term goals. Once in the office, he would clean the table first. Within the next 10 minutes, he would scan all the papers quickly, divide them priority ones into different 2 categories. Those that required immediate actions, low priority one, ones that could be kept pending and reading materials. Then he would put the higher priority papers in front of him and everything out of his sight. Coming back to SLV3, about 250 sub-assemblies and 44 major subsystems were convinced during the design. The list of the material went up to over 1 million components. A project implementation strategy has become essential to achieve sustained viability of the complex program of 7 to 10 years of duration. From his side, Professor Dhawan came up with a clear statement that all the manpowers and the funds at VSSC and SHAR would have to be directed to us. From our side, we evolved a materialistic type of a management to achieve productivity interfacing with more than 300 industries. The target was that our interactions with them must lead to their technical empowerment. 3 things I stressed before his colleagues: importance of design capability, goal settings and realization, and the strength to withstand the step back. Now, before he dwell on the finer aspects of the management of SLV projects, he talked about the SLV3 itself. It is interesting to describe a launch vehicle anthropomorphically. The main mechanical subjects and structures may be visualized as the body of a human being. The control and the guidance system with the associates electronic constitutes the brain. The musculated comes from the propellants. How are they made? What are the material techniques involved? A large variety of materials go into a making of launch vehicle, both metallic and non-metallic, which includes compositic and ceramic. In metal, different type of stainless steels, alloy of aluminium, magnesium, titanium, copper, beryllium, tungsten and molybdenum are used. Composite materials are composed of a mixtures or two or combination of two or more constituent which differs in the form of a materially compensation and which are essentially insoluble in one another. The material which combines may be metallic, organic or inorganic, while other material components possibly or virtually unlimited. The most typical composites in launch vehicles are made of structural constituents embedded in a matrix. We used a large variety of a glass fiber, reinforced plastic composites and open avenues for the entry of Kevlar, polydynamics and carbon-carbon composites. Ceramics are special type of a backed clay used for microwave transportation enclosures. We consider using ceramics but had to reject the idea then due to the technological limitations. Through mechanical engineering, these materials are transformed into hardware. In fact, of all the engineering disciplines, which feed directly into the development of rocketry, mechanical engineering is perhaps the most intrinsic in one. Be it is sophisticated system like a liquid engine or a piece of hardware as simple as a fastener. Its ultimate fabrications call for the except mechanical engineerings and precision machine tools. We decide to develop important technologies like welding techniques for low alloy strain stainless steels, electroforming technicals and ultra precision process tooling. We also decided to make some important machines in-house like 254-liter vertical mixtures and the groove machine facilities for our third and fourth stages. Many of our subsystems were so massive and complex that they implied sizable financial outlays. Without any hesitation, we approached industries in the private sector and developed contract management plans which later became the blueprints for many government-run science and technology business organizations. Coming to the life part of SLVs, there is a complex circuitry which tests the mechanical structures in the motion. This vast spectrum of activities encompassing simple electrical power supplies to sophisticated instrumentation as well as guidance and control system is collectively referred to in aerospace research as avionics. Development efforts in avionics systems has already been initiated at VSSC in the field of digital electronics, microwave radars and radar transporters and in-aerial components and the systems. It is very important to know the state of SLV when it is in flight. SLV brought a new surge of activity in the development of a variety of transducers for measurement of physical parameters like pressure, thrust, vibration, acceleration, etc. The thresholds convert the physical parameters of the vehicle into electrical signals, and on the board telemetry system processes these suitably and transmit them into the form of radio signals into ground stations where they receive and dispatch to the original information collected by the transducers. If system work accordingly to the design, there is a little causes for concern. But in the case something goes wrong, the vehicle must be destroyed to stop it from making any unexpected moves. To ensure safety, a special telecommand system was made to destroy the rocket in the case of malfunctioning, and an interferometer system was developed to determine the range and the position of SLV as an added means to the radar system. The SLV project also initiated the ignition procedures of a sequence which time the various events such as ignition, stage separation, vehicle altitude, programmers with store informations for the rocket maneuvers, and autopilot electronics which takes appropriate decision to steer the rocket along with the predetermined path. Without the energy to propel the whole system, a launch vehicle remains grounded. A propellant is usually a combustible substances that produce heat and supplies ejection particles in a rocket engine. It is both a source of energy and working substances for expanding energy. Because the distinguish is more descriptive in rocket engines, the term propellant is used primarily to describe the chemical carried out by the rockets for propulsive purposes. It is customary to classify propellant as either solid or liquid. We concentrate on solid propellants. A solid propellant consists of essentially of three components: the oxiders, the fuels, and the additives. The solid propellants are further classified into two types: composite and double base. The former consists of oxidizer or inorganic materials like aluminum peripheral, it a matrix organic fuel like synthetic rubber. Double base propellants were distinct dreams those days, but nevertheless we dare to dream about them. All this self-sufficiency and ingenious manufacturer came gradually and not always without pain. We were a team of almost self-trained engineers. In retrospect, I feel the unique blend of our untortured talents, characters, dedications suited SLV development the most. Problems surfaced regularly and almost constantly, but my team members never exhausted my patience. He always recalled the writing after winding up a late night shift. Beautiful hands are those that do work that is earnest and brave and true, moment by moment the long day through. Almost parallel to his work on SLVs, the DRDO was preparing itself for developing an indigenous surface to air mission. The RATO's projects was abandoned because the aircraft for which it was designed became obstacle. The new aircraft did not need RATO with the project called off. Narayanan was DRDO's logical choice to lead the team for making the missile. Unlike us at ISRO, they preferred the psychology of one-to-one substitutional rather than technology development and performance upgrading. The surface to air missile SA-2 of Russia origin was chosen to acquire detailed knowledge of all the design parameters of a proven missile and to establish thereby the necessary infrastructure required in the organization. It was though that once one-to-one was established, further advantage in the sophisticated field of guided missiles would be a natural fallout. The product was sanctioned in February 1972 with the code name Devil and was funded of about rupees 5,000 crores and was made available for the first 3 years. Almost half of it was to go in a foreign exchange. By now promoted to the Air Commander, Narayanan took over as a director for DRDL. He mobilized his young laboratory located in the southeastern suburbs of Hyderabad to take up this enormous task. The landscape dotted with tombs and old buildings scattered reverberating with the new lives. Narayanan was one of the a man of tremendous energy, a man always in the boost phase. He gathered around him a group of strong peoples of enthusiasm, drawing many services officers into his predominantly civilization laboratory. Totally preoccupied with SLV affairs, his participation in the missile panel meeting gradually dwindled and then stopped altogether. However, stories about the Narayanan and his devils were beginning to reach a Trivandrum. A transformation of an unprecedented scale was taking place there. During his association with Narayanan with RATO project, he has discovered that he was a hard task maker, one who went all out of control, mastery and dominations. He used to wonder if managers like him who aim at getting the results no matter what the price would face a revelations of science and non-corporation in the long run. New Year Day 1975 brought it with an opportunity to have a first-person assessment of working going on under Narayanan's leadership. Professor M.G.K. Menon, who was working then as a scientist advisor to the defense minister and was head of DRDO, appointed a review committee under the chairman of Dr. Braham Prakash to evaluate the work carried out in the Devil project. He was taken into the team as a rocket specialist to evaluate the progress made in the area of aerodynamics, structures and proculations of the missile. On the procularization accepts, he was assisted by B.R. Somashekaran and by V.G. Kamaraju. The committee members included Dr. R.P. Shenoy and Professor I.G. Sharma, who were the review done on the electrical systems. We met at DRDL on 1st and 2nd January in 1975, followed by a second session about a 6 week. We visited the various development work centers and held discussion with the scientists there. It was a great impress by the vision of A.V. Rangarao, the dimension of R. Gopalaswamy, the throughoutness of Dr. Acharya Rao, the enterprises of G. Ganeshan, S. Krishnan's clarity of though R. Balakrishnan's critical eye for detail, the calm of J.C. Bhattacharya and late Colonel Dr. Swaminathan in the face of immense complexities was striking. The zeal and the application of the Lieutenant Colonel V.J. Sundaram was conscious. They were very brilliant, committed group of a people, a mix of a service officer and a civilian scientist who have trained themselves in the area of their own interest out of their driving urge to fly an Indian missile. We had our concluding meetings toward the end of the March 1975 at Trivandrum. We felt that the progress in the accession of the projects were adequate in the respect of the hard work, fabrication to carry out the philosophy of one-to-one substationers of the missile subway systems except in the liquid rocket area, where some more times was required to succeed. The committee was of an unammunition option that DRDL has achieved the twin goals of hardware fabrications and the system analysis creditability in the designs and the development of the ground electronic complex assigned to them. We observed that the one-to-one substitution philosophy had taken precedence over the generation of a design data. Consequently, many design engineers had not been able to pay adequate attention to the necessary analysis, which was the practice followed by us at VSSC. The system analysis study carried out up to then had also been only for preliminary nature. In all, the results accomplished were outstanding, but we still had a long way to go. We recalled a school poem, Don't Worry and Fear, faint hearted, the changes just begin, for the best jobs having been started, the best work having been done. The committee made a strong recommendation to the government to give a devil a further go ahead. Our recommendation was accepted and the project proceeded. Back home at VSSLC was taking shape. In contrast to the DRDL, which was sprinting ahead, we are moving slowly instead of following the leaders. Our team was trekking towards success on several individual paths. The essence of a method of work was an emphasis on communication, particularly in the lateral direction, among the teams and within the teams. In a way, communication was mantra for managing this gigantic project. To get the best from the team members, he spoke to them frequently on the goals and the objectives of the organization, emphasizing the importance of each member's specific contributions toward the realization of these goals. At the same time, he tried to reciprocate to every constructive ideas emanating from his subordinates and to relay it in a appropriate from a crucial examination and implementation. He had written somewhere in his diary of that period, if you want to leave your footprints on the sands of the time, do not drag your feet. Most of the time, communication gets confused with a conversation. In fact, two are distinctly different. He was a terrible controversialist, but considered himself a good communicator. A conversation full of plenterious is most often devoid of useful information, whereas communication is meant only for the useful information, whereas the communication exchanges of the information. It is very important to realize the communication is a two-party affair which aims at passing on or receiving a specific piece of information. While working on SLV, we used to communicate to promote understanding and to come to an arrangements with the colleagues in the defining the problem that existed and in identifying the action necessary to be taken to solve them. Authentic communication was one of the tools skillfully used in magnifying the project. How did I do it? To begin with, he tried to be facial and never sugar-coated the bitter pills of fact. At one of the Space Science Council, that is SSC, reviews meeting, frustrated by the procurement delays, he erupted into a agitated compliment against the indifferences and red tape tactics of the collectors of accounts and the financial advisors of VSSC. He insisted that the system of the work followed by the account staffs had to change and demand the delegation of their functions to the project team. Dr. Brahm Prakash was taken back by the bulletness of his permission and submission. He stubbed out his cigarette and walked out of the meeting. He spent the whole night regretting the pain in his harsh word had caused Mr. Brahm Prakash. However, he was determined to fight with the inertia built into the system before he found himself being dragged down with it. He asked himself a particular question: could one live with this intensive? The answer was big no. Then he asked himself a private question: what would hurt Dr. Brahm Prakash more? by seemingly harsh words now, or the burial of the SLV at a later stage. Finding his head and heart agreeing, he prayed to the God for help. Fortunately for him, Dr. Brahm Prakash delegated financial powers to the project in the next morning. Anyone who has taken up the responsibility to lead a team call be successfully only if he is sufficient independent, powerful and influenced in his own rights to become a person to reckon within. This is perhaps also the path to the individual satisfaction in his life. For the freedom with the responsibility in the only sound basis for the personal happiness. What can one do to strengthen the personal freedom? He would like to share with you the two techniques he adopted in his regards. The first, by building his own educational and skills, knowledge is a tangible asset, quite often the most important tool in his work. The more up to date the knowledge you possess, the freer you are. The knowledge cannot be taken away from anyone except by their obstacles. A leader can only be free to lead his team if he keeps abreast of all that is happening around him in real time. To lead in a way is to encourage, is continuing their education. In many countries, it is formal for the professionals to go to the college several nights every week. To be a successful team leader, one has to stay back after the dine and clutters of a working day to emerge better equipped and ready to face a new day. The second way is to develop a passion for a personal responsibility. The sovereign way to the personal freedom is to help determine the forces that determines you. Be active. Take on a responsibility. Work for the things you believe in. If you do not, you are surrendering your fate to the others. The historian Ellen Hamilton wrote in ancient Greek that when the freedom they wished for the most was the freedom from the responsibility. And then Athens ceased to be free and was never free again. The truth is that there is a great deal that most of the forces that threaten to oppress us. We can fortify ourselves with the qualities and the conditions that promotes individual freedom. In doing so, we help to create a stronger, organized, capable of achieving our goals. As work on SLVs gained moments, Professor Darwin introduced the system of reviewing progress with the entire team involved in the project. Professor Darwin was a man with a mission. He would effortlessly pull together all the loose ends to make work move smoothly. At VSSC, the review meeting presided over by Professor Darwin used to be considered major events. He was a true captain of ISRO ship, a commander, a navigator, a housekeeper, all rolled into one. Yet he never pretended to know more than he did. Instead, when something appeared ambitious, he would ask questions and discuss his doubts frankly. He remembered him as a leader for which to lead with a firm, but fair hands was a moral compulsion. His minds used to be very firm once it has been decided on any issues. But before taking a decision, it is used to be like clay, open an impression until the final molding. Then the decisions would be popped into the potter's oven for glazing, never failing to emerge hard and tough, resistant and enduring. He had a privilege of spending a great deal of a time with the Professor Darwin. He could hold the listeners enthralled because of the logical, intellectual acumen he could bring to bear on his analysis on any subjects. He had an unusual combination of a degree, BSc in Mathematics and Physics, and MA in English Literature, BE in Mechanical Engineering, MSc in Aeronautical Engineering, followed by PhD in Aeronautics and Mathematics from the California Institute of Technology in USA. Intellectual debates with him was very stimulating and could always mentally energize him and his team members. He found him full of optimism and compassion, although he often judged himself harshly with no allowances or excuses. He was generous to the fault when it comes to the another. Professor Darwin used to sternly pronounce his judgment and then pardon the continued guilty parties. In 1975, ISRO became a government body, and ISRO Council was formed consisting of the directors of different work centers and senior office in the Department of the Space, DOS. This provided a symbolic link as well as a forum of a particulative management between the DOS, which has the government power, and the central, which would execute the job. In the traditional parlance of the government department, ISRO centers would have been subordinates, units, or attached officers. But such words were never spoken either at ISRO or DOS. Participative management, which calls for an active interaction between those who wield administrative powers and executive agencies, was a novel feature of IRO management that would go away in India R&D organizations. The new setup brought him in the contact with T.N. Seshan, the Joint Secretary in DOS. Till then, he had a latent reservation about him. So he was not only very comfortable when he first saw Seshan participating in a SLV-3 management, but soon it changed to admiring for Seshan, who would methodologically go through the agenda and always come for the meeting prepared. He used to kindle the minds of the scientists with his tremendous analyst capability. First 3 years of SLV projects was a period for the revelation of many fascinating mysteries of the science. Being human, ignorance has always been with him and always be with him others. What was new was his awareness of it. By awaking to its fathomless dimension, he used to autonomous suppose that a function of a science was to explain everything, and that unexplained phenomena were the province of a people like Father Anna Lakshmana Sastri. However, he always refrained from discussing these matters with any of his scientific colleagues, fearing that it would threaten the hegemony of their mysteriously formally viewed. Gradually, he became aware of difference between the science and the technology, between research and the development. Science is inherently open-ended and exploratory. Development is a closed loop. Mistakes are imperative in the developments are made every day, but each mistake is used for modification, upgrading, or betterment. Probably the creator creates engine to make scientists achieve more. For each time scientists come up with throughout researched and fully compared solutions, engineer shows them it to Lumina, yet no more possibilities. He cautioned his team against becoming scientist, science is a passion and never-ending voyage into promises and possibilities. He had only limited time and limited funds. Over making the SLV dependent upon over awareness of his own limits. He preferred existing workable solutions which would be the best option. Nothing that is new comes into a time-bound projects without its own problem. In his opinion, a project leader should always work in proven technologies in the most of the systems as far as possible and experiment only from the multiple resources. The SLV project has been formulated in such a way that the major technology work center, both at VSSR and SHAR, could handle propellant productions, rocket motor testings, and launch of any large diameter rocket. As a participant in the SLV projects, we set 3 milestones from ourselves: developing and flight qualification of all the subsystems through the sounding rocket by 1975, suborbit flights by 1976, and the final orbit flight in 1978. The work tempo had picked up now, and the atmosphere was charged with the excitement. Whatever he went, his team had something interested to show him. A large number of the things were being done for the first time in the country, and the ground level techniques had no prior exposure to this kind of work. He saw new performances dimension growing among his team members. Performance dimensions growing up are the factors that leads to the creation. They go beyond the competitives such as skills and knowledge of the individuals. Performances dimension are broader and deeper than what a person must know and be able to do in order to function well in it or her job. They include attitudes, values, and the characteristics. They exist at various levels of the human personality at the behavior level. At the outermost ring of the tree, we can observe skills and measures knowledge. Social roles and the self-image dimension are found at the intermediate level. Motivators and traits exist at the innermost or core level. If we can identify those performances dimension which are mostly high correlated with the job success, we can put them together to form a blueprint for outstanding performances in both tough and action. Although SLV-3 was still in the future, its subsystems were being completed. In June 1974, he used the Centaur sounding rocket launch to the test some of his critical system. A scaled down heat shield of SLV, rate gyro unit, and the vehicle attitude programmer were integrated into the Centaur rocket. The 3 systems involved wide-ranging experience, composite materials, controlling engineering and software. None of them were even having been tried before in this country. The test was a complete success. Until then, the Indian space program had gone beyond sounding rockets, and even knowledgeable people were not ready to see and acknowledge its effort as anything more serious than flitting around the meteorological instruments. For the first time, his team, were inspired the confidence of the nation. Prime Minister Indira Gandhi told the Parliament on 24 July 1974, the development and the fabrications of the relevant technologies, subsystems, and the hardware to make India's first satellite launch vehicle are progressing satisfactorily. A number of industries are engaged in the fabrications of the components. The first orbital flight by India is scheduled to take place in 1978. Like any others of a creation, the creation of a SLV-3 also its painful moments. One day when his team and he were engrossed in the preparation of the statistic test of the first stage motor, the news of the death in the family reached him. His brother-in-law and mentor Janib Ahmad Jalaluddin was no more. For a couple of minutes, he was immobilized. He could not think, could not feel anything. When he could focus on his own surrounding once more and attempted to participate in his work, he found himself talking incoherently, and then he realized that with Jalaluddin, a part of him has passed away too. A vision of his childhood reappeared before him. Evening talks around the Rameshwaram temple, shining sand, and the dancing tides in the moonlights, star looking down from an unlit skies on a new moonlight, Jalaluddin showing him the origin sinking in the sea, arranging money for the books, and seeing of the Santa Cruz airport. He felt that he had been thrown into a whirlpool of time and space. His father, now by more than 100 years old, pall-bearer of his son-in-law, who had been half in his age, the beautiful soul of his sister Zara, her wounded for the loss of her 4-year-old son, still raw, these images came before his eye in a blur, too terrible for him to comprehend. He leaned on the assembly jig, composed himself, and left a few instructions with Dr. S. Srinivasan, the deputy project director, to carry on with the work in his absence. Traveling overnight in a combination of a district buses, he reached Rameshwaram only the next day. During this time, he did his best to free himself from the very past which appeared to have come to an end to his friend Jalaluddin. But at the moment he reached his home, grief assigned him refuge. He had no words for Zora or for his niece Mehboob. Both of them were crying uncontrollably. He had no tears to shed. He sorrowfully put Jalaluddin's bodies to rest. His father held his hand for a long time. There was no tear in his eyes either. Do you not see, Abdul, how the Lord strengthened the shadows? Has it been his will, he could have made the constant. But he makes the sun their guide. Little by little he shortened them. It is he who have made the night a mantle for you and sleep a rest. Jalaluddin has gone into a long sleep, a dreamless sleep, a complete rest of all his being within simple and conscious. Nothing will befall us except what Allah has ordinated. He is our guardian. In Allah, my son, put your trust. He slowly closed his wrinkled eyelid and went into a trance-like state. Death has never frightened him. After all, everyone has to go on the day. But perhaps Jalaluddin went a little too early, a little too soon. He could not bring himself to stay for a long time. He felt that the whole of his inner self drowning in the sort of anxious agitating, an inner conflict between his personal and the professional life. For many days back in a tumba, He felt a sense of futility and had never known before about everything he was doing. He had a long talk with Professor Darwin. He told him that his progress on SLV project would bring him a solace. The confession would be the first lesson and would later pass away altogether. He drew his attention to the wonders of the technology and his achievements. Gradually, the hardware begins emerging from the drawing boards. Sashikumar built a very effective works of fabrication work centers. Within days of getting a component drawing, he would embark on the fabrications with which was valuable. Namboothiri and Pillai was spending their days and nights at the propulsion laboratory developing 4 rocket motors simultaneously. MSR Dev and Sandals drew up the meticulous plan for the mechanical and the electrical integrations of the vehicle. Madhavan Nair and Murthy examined the system developed by VSS's electronic laboratories and engineered them into a flight subsystems whenever it was possible. U.S. Singh brought up the first launch ground system, comprising of the telemetry, telecommand and the radar. He also chalked out a detailed work plan with Shar for the flight trial. Dr. Sundararajan, closely monitoring the mission objective and concurrently updated the system. Dr. Srinivasan, a component launch vehicle designer, discharged all his complementary and supplementary function as the SLV deputy project director. He noticed what had overlooked, heard the points that failed to listen, and suggested possibilities that he do not so much as visualized. He learned that the hard way the biggest problem of the project manage is to achieve a regular and efficient interfacing between the different individuals and work centers. Hard work can be set at naught in the absence of his proper coordination. He had that fortune of having Y.S. Rajan from ISRO headquarters as his friend in those times. Rajan was a universal friend. His friendship embraced with equal warmth turners, fitters, electricals and the drivers, as well as scientists, engineers, contractors and others. Today, when the press call him a welder of the people, it attribute this to the Rajan. His close interaction with different work centers created such harmony in SLV affairs that the fine threads of individual efforts were woven into a mighty fabric of the great strength. In 1976, his father passed away. He has been in a poor health for quite some time due to his advanced age. The death of Jalaluddin had also taken a toll on his youth and spirit. He had lost his desire to live, as though after seeing Jalaluddin return to his divine source. He too had become eager to return to this. Whenever he learned about his father's indifferent health, he would visit Rameshwaram with the good city doctors. Every time he did so he would chide him for unnecessary concern and literature him on the expanded incorrected on the doctors. His visit is enough for him to get well. Why bring a doctor and spend money on his fees? He would ask. This time he had gone beyond the capabilities of any doctors and care or money. His father Jalaluddin, who had lived on the Rameshwaram island for 1 or 2 years, had passed away, leaving behind 15 grandchildren and 1 great grandson. he had led an exemplary life. Sitting alone on the right night after the burial, he remembered a poem written on the deaths of the Yeats by his friend and felt as if it was written for his father. Earth receive an honored guest. Williams East is laid to rest. In the presence of his days, teach the freeman how to praise. In this worldly term, it was the death of just another old man. No public mourning was organized, no flags were lowered to half-mast, no newspaper carried out. He was not a politician, a scholar, or a businessman. He was a plain and a transparent man. His father pursued the supreme values, and his father's life is inspired the growth of all that begins and wise and noble. His father had always remembered him of the legendary Abu Ben Adam, who, walking one night from a deep dream of a peace, saw an angel writing in a book of gold the names of those who love the God. Abu asked the angel if his own name was on the list. The angel replied in the negative. Disappointment, but still cheerful, Abu said, "Write my name down as on one that loved his fellow man." The angel wrote and vanished. The next night it came again with a great awakening lights and showed the names of those whom the love of the God has been blessed. And Abu's name was the first on the list. He sat for a long time with his mother but could not speak. She blessed him in a choked voice when he took leave for him to return to Tumba. She knew that she was not able to leave the house of her husband, of which she was custodied, and was not to live with her there. Both of us had to live out our own destinies. Was he was too stubborn, or was it excessively preoccupied with the SSLV? Should he has forgotten for a while by his own affairs in order to listen to her? He regretfully realized that this one when she passed away soon afterwards. Thank you.